Welcome back to Nerf Game Theory. I am Captain Xavier, and today I'm going to start talking about scenario mechanics. I've been talking about game mechanics up to this point. Now I'm going to talk about specific scenario mechanics and how you can tailor your scenarios to better fit your group once you've got your rules set down. And I'm going to start by talking about respawns, or just elimination in general. In the spirit of more fun for everyone, I prefer the games where no one is ever permanently eliminated, because it's never fun to be the first person eliminated who then has to sit out and watch everyone else have fun for the rest of the game. Now there are game types where that is specifically the point. It's a 5v5 direct elimination. The whole point is to get better at the game so you don't get eliminated. They tend to be real fast rounds. They tend to, you're not going to be out for very long before the next round starts, and that works perfectly fine. There are game modes where it makes sense, but for the big games with lots of kids, the little kids do not respond well to being the first person eliminated. They tend to respond a lot better to having an infinite number of lives where you just have to say, oh, go respawn, as opposed to, no, you can't play anymore. A little kid's not going to handle that well. So we look at games where you don't have to worry about that. Now, you can have something of a middle ground where people have a certain number of lives, and once you run out of lives, you're eliminated. We do some games involving that, and we generally will do an elimination round right at the beginning, when people are still trickling in and we're just kind of warming up and getting ready, and we'll typically do a 3-15 is what we call it, where you've got 3 lives and there's a 15-second respawn in between, and you just respawn on the fly. And this is really good for getting warmed up when not everybody's there. It doesn't require field setup, it doesn't require team build, creation or anything like that. It's a real quick game to just, all right, we're doing this, spread out on the field and go! Very good for a starting round. We'll also often do an elimination round at lunchtime, so once you're eliminated, go have lunch. And then we'll often do it for the last round, where once you're eliminated, okay, go start packing up. And it helps stagger things a little bit better. But for the most part, we deal with infinite resurrection lives, infinite respawns, where either there is a victory condition that will stop the round, something like capture the flag or plant the flag, and once one of the two teams manages to achieve that victory condition, it ends the round. Or we'll do a timed round, and the two teams are just trying to accrue as many points as possible. And there's lots of different ways that you can set up your scenarios based on those two concepts, and I will talk about those. Now I'm going to talk about the mechanics of the respawn itself, because there are, as with everything in this hobby, pretty much an infinite number of ways you can set up the mechanic for the respawn. And certain scenarios and certain game types and certain locations and certain numbers of groups, all of that is going to determine what respawn works best for a given scenario, which is why I'm putting this down under a scenario mechanic and rather than a game mechanic, because we will usually have a completely different respawn mechanic for every scenario. So the respawn mechanic is linked to the scenario rather than being a standard game mechanic that just applies to all rounds. And true, some of the other game mechanics can also be varied depending on scenario, but this one does so more. It's more linked to the scenario. And like I said, there's lots of different ways you can do it. You can have an in-place respawn where you're down and you raise your hand for 5 seconds and then you get back up. The downside is the likelihood of getting hit again before you can do anything. We have done ones that are kind of freeze tag based, where when you get tagged, you're stuck in place until a member of your team comes and manages to actually physically touch you or tag you or something. Generally, if a teammate is able to get up and do that, they've probably cleared out the enemy enough that you're going to be able to get to cover or push forward or what have you. We will often do it where that is the whole game, is once one whole team has been eliminated and no one is left standing to be able to unfreeze anybody, that ends the round. You can also do ones where once you're tagged, you're stuck in place, and once one of your teammates touches you, you are now free to go back to the respawn location and respawn normally. This can be another way where you can have battlefield attrition. The downside to that is, of course, if you get stuck behind enemy lines and no one is ever able to get to you, that can really suck. And for that, you could then have, a 30-second in-place respawn, at which point you can go back to your respawn point. Or if someone can get to you, you respawn immediately from where you are. This would potentially encourage a more aggressive game style, where players are pushing forward and working as teams because they can keep respawning each other as you go in order to push forward. It's another option. If you're just going to have a respawn point that people have to go back to, There's lots of different ways you can do that. We've done it where your respawn counter starts as soon as you're tagged, and it'll be something like a 15-second or a 20-second respawn counter. But the time it takes you to get back to your respawn point counts towards that timer. So if you were tagged on the opposite side of the field, it might take you longer than your respawn timer to get back to respawn. So as soon as you get there, you immediately back in. If you were tagged really close to your respawn point, it might take you 5 seconds to get back to the respawn point, and then you have to count to 10 and you're back in. You can do just a standard. Once you get to the respawn point, you hit the respawn thing, whether it's a flag or a cone or whatever. As soon as you tap it, you're back in. You can have, once you get there, you tap it and count to 5 and you're back in. Hit it, count to 10 and you're back in. What have you. We've also done what are called rolling respawns, where the first person to get back to respawn starts counting, and it'll generally be something like a 10-second, or rather a 20-second or a 30-second respawn. But everybody who gets there during that count, they all come in at once when the count is completed. So the first person is there for the full 30 seconds. But someone who got there 10 seconds later, they'd only be there for 20 seconds. Someone who got there at, 29 on a 30-second count, they would only be there for 1 second. And then they all come back in together. And so you have waves of respawns coming in. And that very much has an effect on the scenario. Because if it's something like holding a control point or gathering, the balls from the middle of the field or something like that, where it's very beneficial to be able to clear out a whole bunch of the players at once and then be able to work without having to worry about being attacked. But then when everyone comes in a big wave, they tend to then drive you back out because they've come in a coordinated wave, and it goes back and forth, and again, it changes the way the game works. You can also have respawns that are not equal. Though if you're going to do that, there should be something else taking account. Because again, you don't want game mechanics giving one side an advantage unless it's very intentionally built into the scenario. So at the last war that we had at Out of Darts' warehouse, he's got a kind of an upper area, a balcony kind of thing, and a handful of people were tasked with defending it. So I think we had 4 or 5 people that were defending, and everyone else was attacking. Now the people defending, because they had the high ground, because they had cover, because all of that, they only had 3 lives each. And once their 3 lives were up, they went and they joined the attackers. The attackers had infinite respawns, but they had to go all the way to the backside of the arena, and I think it was like a 5-second count or something. And then they were back in. And the attackers, again, having infinite lives, there was a time limit. They had, I think it was 3 minutes, to eliminate all of the defenders, or the defenders won. And sometimes the defenders won, and sometimes the attackers won. It went back and forth depending on how organized they got. It worked. The sides were imbalanced, but it worked. And having the defender join the attacking side didn't create that much more of an imbalance. Yeah, the defenders were losing someone and they were gaining someone, but they were already had infinite lives. So it really didn't make that much of a difference, and it meant that attacker wasn't eliminated for the rest of the game. And you could actually do that. That is the entire mechanic. As soon as someone is tagged, they immediately join the other team and have to go respawn. And that's one where once you start winning, you tend to keep winning, and you would play until one side has all of the players. But it meant that one lucky person could get 3 or 4 tags, and the game would keep going. That might be one that just goes back and forth and no side is ever able to completely win. So you might put a timer on it. Whichever team has the most players after 5 minutes wins. The goal is just to make sure that everyone is having as much fun as possible. And again, this is something that you're going to want to experiment with and tweak and find out, well, do we like 5-second? Do we like immediate? Do we like 10-second? Do we like rolling respawns? What works with capture the flag? What works with this? What works with this? Figure it out. Work out what works for your play, for your game styles, for your scenarios. But it's definitely something you need to sit down and think about and tweak and test and work with. So that's my thought on respawns. Hope this was helpful. Let me know what you guys do, because if you use a respawn style that I haven't mentioned, I would love to hear about it, because I love trying new stuff. Obviously, we did the one where the respawn was the pistols. We did the bucket of pistols, where when you got tagged, you had to drop your pistol, go back to your spawn point, get another pistol from the bucket, and go back in. And it ended either when one side completely ran out of pistols and all of their team members were eliminated, or at a timer. And then at the end of the timer, we counted how many pistols the team had in their possession, either in their bucket or on their people. But that was how we did it. We've also done respawn pools, where there was a bucket of balls, and when you got tagged, you took a ball out of the bucket, and when the bucket was empty, your team was eliminated. One, you're out of balls and all of the rest of your players were eliminated, because it might be possible for that, the 2 people that are still in to lead you to victory. With the bucket of pistols, it worked because one of the people that might still be in might bring more pistols back, at which point players that had, players could then respawn. So anyway, those are the ideas. Let me know what you guys have done. If you have any suggestions, recommendations, ideas, love to hear all of that down in the comments. And thank you guys for watching.